Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking all about my 24 5-star predictions for 2024 and how those books went, what the outcomes actually were. I happened to read all of the books on my most anticipated list this year pretty far in advance of the end of the year, and I thought, you know what, October seems like the perfect time to sit down and talk about all these books with you. Some were in fact 5 stars, but as per usual, not all of them were, so I am excited to rant, to rave, to talk to you all about these 5-star predictions, so hopefully you can add something to your TBR before the end of the year. But before we get into it, I have got to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Ritual, who have become a really integral part of my daily routine now. They're a brand that does the hard work for you, so you have the peace of mind knowing what's going into your body. For the past few months, I have personally been using the Synbiotic Plus, which is a 3-in-1 prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic that supports a balanced gut microbiome and digestive health. Synbiotic Plus is designed with 2 clinically studied strains of probiotics to help with digestive discomforts like bloating and gas and support healthy regularity. So a few months ago, I went on my first antibiotic. I know it's crazy that I'm nearly 30 and have never been on an antibiotic before, but that wreaked havoc on my gut health. I knew that I wanted to support my digestion, and Synbiotic Plus has been making such a big difference. The kind of difference where I notice if I skip a day of taking this. Again, it's more than just a probiotic, which I love. It contains prebiotics and postbiotics in one capsule. Prebiotics support the growth of beneficial bacteria, and postbiotics support gut barrier function. Daily disturbances of life like poor diet, stress, certain medications, like the one that I was on, can really throw our gut off kilter. That's why it's important to take a supplement like Synbiotic Plus daily. Really big on habit stacking, so after I feed my cats at night, I'm reminded to take my Synbiotic Plus because it's in the same drawer with their food scale. It's just 1 minty capsule daily, and I love that you can take it any time of day with or without food, and it's shelf stable, so I don't have to refrigerate it, which is super awesome, especially if you'd like to travel with it. And it's subscription based, so you never run out, because again, consistency is super key when you are trying to support your digestive health. To check out Ritual and Synbiotic Plus for yourself, click the link in my description or use the code ChandlerAinsley25 to get 25% off your first order, or you can use the cute little QR code on the screen right here. Thanks again to Ritual for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Now let's talk about all of my 5-star predictions for 2024 and whether or not they actually panned out. First up, we have Pirate Girls. I thought when I put this on my list that this was going to be a very plot-driven love triangle romance. I was kind of wrong on the love triangle front, but this book definitely is a plot-driven story. This book is the second in the Hellbent series by Penelope Douglas, which follows the children of the couples from the Fallaway series. If you've read Bully / if you've been around for a while when it comes to new adult romances, you probably have heard of Bully. These books, again, are kind of like a spin-off continuation of that series with like a darker, grittier spin. It focuses a lot on town legends and ghost stories. This book follows our heroine, Dylan, who is the daughter of the hero and heroine of Bully. And she's, of course, not like other girls. She's really into racing motorbikes. Her dad actually like owns a racetrack and has his own racing team. And our heroine is really interested not in racing cars like her dad does, but in racing motorbikes in specific. Her dad really is not super supportive of her ambitions and her dreams. He wants her to go to college, have like a normal, healthy, safe life, but of course she has to be the rebel, the bad girl, and this kind of puts her in a tough spot. Like, her and her parents, as she's a senior in high school, just like haven't been meshing very well, and so when Dylan gets the opportunity to potentially be traded to a rival high school during homecoming week, she decides she's going to jump on this opportunity. She comes from a sort of like posh upbringing, maybe not like super spoiled, but definitely, you know, a nicer, well-funded high school. She trades to a less affluent high school, and she's definitely in for a shock and a surprise when she is around all of these like rough and tumble people. She can definitely hold her own. I mean, that's like kind of part of the story, but she goes there and she is quickly acquainted with how different it is. Basically, the way the tradition works is that for 2 weeks, you know, you trade a student with the other high school and they get kind of like bullied and hazed or whatever. I guess the administration and parents are okay with this. But while she's there, she ends up coming back into contact with her cousin, who's not really her cousin because it'd be weird if they were fucking, her cousin Hunter, who has transferred to this rival high school to get away from his twin brother. Cade is a bit of a bully. He is the quarterback on the like Richie Rich high school football team. He and his brother don't really see eye to eye, which is a big part of the story. And that I thought was going to really play into the romance. I really thought that Cade and Hunter were going to be fighting over our heroine. And while that does kind of come into play in the story, it's really not what I consider to be a traditional love triangle. It's very clear, I think, from the beginning that Hunter is like end game for Dylan. I don't want to say makes it less exciting, but I do think that that would have been a juicy like little tidbit thrown in there. Regardless, the story is kind of complicated when it comes to the plot, just beyond Hunter and Dylan reuniting and kind of falling in love. There are, again, these like ghost stories and these rivalries and the complicated relationships between the 2 different towns towns, again, who have very different like socioeconomic statuses. I personally enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed the plot points of the story. I do think at times it gets a little bit convoluted, and I don't think this is a story that I would necessarily recommend for everybody. But as someone who really thrives off of angst and tension and romance, this was really refreshing. This is actually one of the books that I have read most recently compared to some of the others on this list, which I read like back in February or March. Very fresh in my mind, and it was just what I needed to hit the spot. And while it wasn't quite a 5-star book, I gave this one 4 stars, and I am glad that I like added it to my predictions list. One book that I probably should have just skipped, and I know now in the future going forward to skip this kind of story, is Five Brothers by Penelope Douglas. I just threw both Pen Douglas releases for the year onto this list because I was like, surely one of them will pan out. And it's true, one of them did. Unfortunately, it was not Five Brothers. This one, even in my original video when I was talking about like my 5-star predictions and like what I thought was going to be great, this is the one that I was most tentative about. This is the one that sounded most Credence-esque, and I didn't love Credence, especially the second, third time around that I've read that book. So I didn't hold out high hopes for this one because it had the same vibe. I mean, it's literally called Five Brothers. You can only guess what happens. It was simply not for me, okay? It really wasn't. This book follows our heroine named Christian, Krisjen. She's recently graduated from high school and is basically screwing around until her mom can marry her off to a 40-year-old to save the family. It's very much giving my mom is trying to sell me to One Direction vibes, but I was willing to look past like the crazy ass plotline, or at least like the setup for this book. I was like, okay, I'm willing to put that aside as long as the rest is not crazy. That wasn't the case though. The rest actually was fucking crazy. Anyway, Christian is taking care of her siblings because her mom is just like not in a place to do so. Her dad left the family to go shack up with his mistress a couple of streets away, and the mom is just kind of like spending money willy-nilly until the divorce goes through, and then she knows that they're going to be destitute, which is again why she's trying to sell Christian off to One Direction. But anyway, she is taking care of her siblings. She gets a job at a diner in kind of the Cedar part of town. She of course is from the right side of the tracks. She wants to bang the guys from the wrong side of the tracks. Here's the way this book is set up though, because I think this is really what told me that I wasn't going to enjoy this book. Our heroine, at the beginning of the story, this is the first chapter, she is being picked up by a guy on the side of the road. She's just like walking, minding her own business, and this guy is like, hey, get in the car or I'll murder you, kind of. And it was scary. It was shocking. I was like, is this going to be the way we're starting the story? Is there going to be an assault that happens? No, actually, after way too many pages, we figure out that the guy that's picking her up in a truck is actually her like kind of semi-part-time boyfriend, a role play scenario. But during this role play scenario, I think he forgets to bring condoms and she gets upset. They end up going back to his house. They don't hook up, but her car tires are slashed by a jealous ex-girlfriend, and so she's gonna sleep on the couch. She doesn't let the fact that she's at someone else's house prevent her from flicking the bean, pleasuring herself while someone in the corner watches. And once she figures out that someone's watching her in the dark, she decides to stop. She doesn't decide to leave this situation though. She decides to tell this stranger, who she literally has no idea who this person is in the corner, right? She tells this person her life story, again, about being sold to One Direction, about the fact that she's taking care of her siblings and that she's gonna be married to this 40-year-old man and her life isn't what she wanted it to be. And this culminates in her fucking the stranger in the corner, raw intercourse, if you will. It's kind of an ongoing, is she pregnant, is she not? She's not, but it is a question, certainly. After this, she proceeds to bang each of the five brothers in this house to kind of, I guess, figure out which key fits perfectly in the lock. And of course, the last guy she ends up banging is the one that she banged at the beginning of the book and is, of course, like her perfect match, because the sex that she had with that stranger was like her perfect, most magical O, and she's never had that with a partner before, and so of course they're meant to be. This sounds crazy. That's because it fucking was. Candidly, I didn't finish this book. I mean, I skimmed it. I very much skimmed it because I had to know what the fuck was happening and who she would end up with. I got about to the 50% mark reading it fully, and then 50% mark on, I was like, I can only read about her squealing over new sausage just so many times before I go crazy. So yeah, I skimmed it. Okay, I did. So I'm not gonna rate this book, but I can tell you with some degree of certainty that it was not for me. Moving on, shall we, to a book that is completely different, a book that is a guaranteed safe bet, shall we say. If Penn's books are wildly unpredictable, Elsie Silver's books are a guaranteed safe bet, so let's talk about Wild Love. Here's the thing, sometimes predictability is great, sometimes it gets a little bit boring. This book is a single dad, small town, billionaire, brother's best friend romance. And if that sounds like a lot of tropes, it's because it is. The book's about Ford. Ford finds out that the spum that he donated was used to create a 12-year-old girl whose father has recently passed away. And because her mother is in mourning still and really can't handle raising her at the moment, Ford decides that he is going to take over for a little bit while the mom grieves. And then our heroine Rosie is looking for a job because she got unceremoniously fired after reporting assault at her last job. So she is dealing with a lot, shaken confidence, obviously, just questioning her own self-worth for sure when she comes to this small town that she is from, and she decides she's going to work for Ford. I don't know if she like tries to convince him to give her a job or if he's like just running to give her a job, not really sure, but she ends up working for him. They end up falling in love. Are we surprised? surprised? Are we shocked? We shouldn't be because it's an Elsie Silver book. It was sweet enough, right? I really appreciated the different kind of family dynamic here. I really like to see Ford's journey to kind of like become a parent. I thought that was really cool. I don't think I see that often in these sorts of romances, especially like a single dad romance. I just feel like it kind of lacked what I love about some of Elsie Silver's early stuff. And again, I think predictability is awesome sometimes. Like, I like picking up an author's book and kind of more or less knowing what I'm going to get. The problem, I think, as she continues to write is that I think things get a little bit sanitized for my liking. I feel like she used to do really intense angst and tension. I feel like her heroines used to be a little bit more prickly, a little bit more unlikable. Both of her characters in her older books, like hero and heroine, tended to grow more as the story went on. I feel like a book like this, I wanted our heroine to not necessarily grow, but to heal from the things that had happened to her. And I feel like that kind of got pushed to the back burner so she could just like fuck Ford in a bucket of wall paint. Here's the thing, it was a good book, it was safe, it was predictable, but sometimes I want a little bit more nuance, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So it was a solid 4-star book for me. It's one of those books that I just don't think I'm going to think about a lot in the future or really like rush to recommend to people. I feel like Elsie's other stuff I prefer more. So this next one is really tough for me because I put it on this list because I love this author's writing, and I did really love this book. I originally rated this book 5 stars, but I read another book from this author this year. I was kindly, I don't want to say gifted a copy, I was kindly asked to sensitivity read this author's book that's coming out this year, and it was just one of the best things I've ever read. So it's like hard to compare this book that I loved to that book that is like a new all-time favorite. Let me break it down for you, okay? Savor It by Tara DeWitt is the book that I'm talking about, and Left It Forever is the book that I was asked to sensitivity read for. Please check that out when it comes out. I mean, it is just truly remarkable. But this book is fun, and I put it on the list because I expected it to be really deeply romantic and also funny, because that's what I've come to expect from this author in the past, and she fucking delivered. I mean, she really did. This book is about our main character, Sage, who is recently dumped by a long-term boyfriend. It would be kind of devastating for anyone, but is especially devastating to Sage on 2 different levels. On the one hand, this has really shaken her confidence and made her feel kind of like unworthy, for reasons that you find out in the book. And then also, she wants to enter into this town-wide competition, but she can't really do that on her own. She needs a partner to do it. She's out of luck because she doesn't have a boyfriend. So she enlists the help of her new temporary neighbor, Fisher. Fisher is in town because he is dealing with the grief and the loss of his sister, now the guardian of his niece, who's a teenager and really prickly and difficult. And he is also just like doubting his own skills and abilities. He is a chef, and he is supposed to be helping open and plan menu. This new restaurant. He used to be in New York, now he's here temporarily. It's not gonna be a forever thing, okay? But like he's here, and he and Sage fall for each other, and it is just so charming. I loved the moments of levity from the humorous moments, of which there are plenty. I also really appreciated how both of these characters grow throughout the book, how they kind of help to heal each other, but how the individual journeys are so important as well. Like, there definitely is time where these characters have to kind of like retreat and work on themselves for the relationship to work, and it just felt so realistic. I so appreciated both characters' journeys. Fisher is a total green flag of a man. Honestly, I think this book is one that could appeal to a lot of people. Again, it does have that like deep heart to it, but with the humor there is some levity. Like, it's not overly melodramatic, which I know that some people have kind of a hard time with. The more I talk about this book, the more I'm like, no, this is a 5-star read. Like, I'm not going to change my rating for this book, but really truly Left It Forever is like 6-star read material, so like check that one out. I like cannot stress enough how much I love that book. It's about divorced people, by the way, kind of finding their way back to each other. I feel like that's kind of a trope that is hard to pull off. I've only ever seen it done once before that I enjoyed, and it was from the illustrious, the wonderful, the amazing, the incredible Kennedy Ryan. So Tara DeWitt does a book just as well as Kennedy Ryan. I don't know, I just feel like you need to pick up Left It Forever. Anyway, okay, bye. Talk about the next book next to you. This one on the list because it was getting republished and I hadn't read the prior version or whatever. I don't know if the book actually like changed when it got republished, but I adored Out on a Limb. It was one of my favorite books of last year, and I was like, you know what, this is gonna be good. It's a friends to lovers story. I love a good friends to lovers. I didn't really love this one, but I'll try to break down why. This one is about Lane and Matt, who hook up or kiss at the beginning of the book, like on New Year's. They get kind of introduced to each other through mutual friends. They're not childhood friends. They're not like people who've known each other forever. At the start of this book is when they meet. Over the course of the story, they become friends and realize that there's something more there. Try to fight their attraction for each other. There is kind of a friends to benefits element to the story as well. This book has Lane, who is dealing with grief, Matt, who is dealing with his own stuff. The way that they kind of like maintain their friendship and stay in close proximity is that they're renovating a bus for a heroine to live in. This book kind of didn't work for me, mostly because there was no semblance of angst angst and tension. I know that I said the last book didn't have a lot of melodrama, and that is true. This book doesn't either, but I think it also lacked angst and tension, and I just need that for a story to fully land. So this was just 3 stars for me. All right, a book that I put on the list for vibes and vibes only turned out to be a 5-star read, and that would be The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. If anyone is going to take a historical fantasy, which I notoriously dislike, it's something that I'm into, it would be Leigh Bardugo. So this book is about our main character, Luzia. She is a servant for a kind of awful family during the Spanish Inquisition, until one day she is discovered to have magic that can elevate the status of the family that she works for. They are going to kind of like sponsor her almost, and she is going to, I guess, hopefully win a competition by the disgraced Secretary of Spain. He is looking for people with magical abilities that can be peddled as like from God, so that the king might have him in his favor again, right? This guy is disgraced. He's gonna bring a magical person with him, and the king's gonna be like, oh my god, come back, I love you so much, you know? The person that discovers Luzia's magic, though, is not the secretary, right? Somebody else, and he is kind of a piece of shit, which makes things complicated. Also complicated is the spooky dude in his employ that is supposed to train Luzia and, you know, get her magic looking real top-notch for this competition. Does she fall for the spooky man? Yes, she does. Is it strangely romantic, even though it's not really a romance? Also, yes. This book is one that I just don't really know how to talk about. It's one that I don't really foresee a lot of people enjoying, as evidenced by the rating of this book on Goodreads. I think a lot of people didn't know what to really think about it. I think that's also kind of how Ninth House went, but that one at least didn't have the historical element to it. I feel like Ninth House is a slightly easier sell. This one's kind of tough. It's a slow-moving historical fantasy where the majority of the historical stuff wasn't all that interesting. It's also hardly a true romance. I don't know. It's hard to sell. I'm feeling protective of it because it is actually one of the most deeply romantic things I've ever read. I gave it 5 stars. Moving on to a book that I have actually in my possession to hold up. Funny Story by Emily Henry. I put on this list because I was intrigued by this idea of our heroine fake dating her ex's new fiance's ex-boyfriend. I don't know, I was holding out hope that I would like this one despite not liking almost all of Emily Henry's books. I feel like I just had such good luck with People We Meet on Vacation that I was really hopeful that this one would be just as successful. While it was not the 5-star I was expecting or hoping for, it was actually very good, and I'm gonna tell you why. So this book is about Daphne and Miles. Daphne has been with this incredible guy named Peter for a while, and she is now engaged, and she is going to move to his childhood town, and they're gonna move into a home together that Peter owns. That's important. She could be with him, which is super romantic. Only trouble is, Peter has a female best friend, and this female best friend rears her ugly little head on his bachelor party. She confesses her love for him, and he does the same, and he unceremoniously kicks our heroine out of the house that she just moved into with him, and now she is left kind of in a pickle because she's in this place she doesn't know. She has left security to be with this man who she really thought she could count on. She's feeling stupid. She doesn't know what to do. But the good news is Peter is engaged to a woman named Petra, right? Or he's going to be engaged to a woman named Petra that he cheated on his fiance with. Anyway, Petra used to date a guy named Miles. Miles needs a roommate, and our heroine needs a place to live. Ergo, she moves in with this man. Loved the plot on paper because it felt really rom-com-y. It felt like something I hadn't really read before, but I love a good like revenge fake dating plot line because of course Daphne and Miles are going to fake date, and they do, but it is much more than that. This story is really about Daphne, who is deeply distrustful of men because her dad is a super flaky person who continues to come into her life in this book. We also have Miles, who is not distrustful of men, but is distrustful, I guess, of relationships and or his own happiness because of the way that he grew up and the family structure he grew up in. His sister comes to visit for part of the book as well. I think what I appreciated about this book in comparison to some of Emily Henry's others is that this one felt a lot more realistic, and I feel like the main characters were much more sympathetic. I'm consistently bitching about how Emily Henry's heroes all tend to feel the same. Don't get me wrong, I love a simp hero. I love a hero who is obsessed with the heroine, but not at the expense of him having his own character traits and flaws. And I feel like Emily Henry, really, her stories tend to fall apart for me for that reason. I'm like, how is this going to work long term when I don't even know who this man is? And like why they should be a good match? This book, I could see it because of how flawed our hero was and because our heroine was needing the particular flaws that he has. I don't know, it was just really, really well crafted, I have to say. The only thing that I didn't love about the story was how much the family stuff was involved. I think it lent itself a little bit more to the women's fiction side of things than the romance side of things. Had some of that been toned down a little bit, I maybe would have liked it more. This one is better than most, I think, and Daphne didn't abandon medical school to make pottery, so that's a win in my books. 4 stars. Before I picked up Bride, I thought that this book was going to be about a woman kind of like sacrificing herself for vampire family. It's a vampire werewolf romance, okay? I think we all know that by now. I really thought this was going to give that like traditional throwback 2000s goodness, right? Heroine was going to be really plucky and she was going to, I don't know, just like do this for her family. She's like, I'm strong, I'm gonna go live with the werewolves, and there was gonna be kind of like a combative, playful, bantery relationship between hero and heroine. This book is not that, but I still liked it. This book's about our main character, Misery, who is the daughter of a vampire councilman, and she agrees to, I guess, be married off to the werewolf on the other side of the river. I don't know if that's metaphorical or physical, I honestly can't remember, and I don't know why river came to mind, but live in different places. She goes to live kind of in the country with this werewolf and his pack. The pack doesn't like her, they don't understand her kind. She also kind of feels the same way. As the story carries on, of course, she and the hero start to understand each other more and realize that their species differences don't necessarily mean that they can't fall in love. What I liked about this book was the tone of it. I wouldn't say it's quite Twilight-esque, but there is a certain melancholy to this story that I wasn't expecting, but I found kind of refreshing. Considering that most of Ali Hazelwood's books up until this point have been very tropey, very fanficky in the best possible way, but this felt different, and I think that that departure was fun, not only like in a genre sense, but also in a tonal sense. I really did like Misery's character, and while she wasn't someone that I deeply related to, I think that there are pieces of her that I really appreciated, and I think that a lot of people will really like her as a heroine. I wouldn't call her timid necessarily, but because of the things she's been through, she is definitely not this like in-your-face traditional paranormal heroine, I would say. And I liked that. I also found this book deeply fucking sexy, despite the nodding. I think that says a lot about what Ali Hazelwood is able to pull off. Give this book 5 stars. All right, moving on to another Ali Hazelwood book, because her publishing schedule is just relentless. I was really excited about Not in Love, because this is one of the only Ali Hazelwood contemporaries, if not the only Ali Hazelwood adult contemporary, not set in a university. And it sounded like it was going to be enemies to lovers, tropey excellence. It's about Rue, who is a biotech engineer at a food science company, and a guy named Eli who is trying to buy/take over this food science company. Again, like Bride, this is one that I really thought was going to be fanficky in the sense that I thought there was going to be a lot of like sniping at each other and like personal sabotage and like fun. It was not that at all. These two basically start fucking before they know that they actually work together, and they find out that they work together and then they still keep fucking. And over the course of the story, you find out more about Eli's intentions in buying the company, and you find out more about Rue's history and why she is reluctant to enter into a relationship and is more interested in just sleeping with Eli. Normally, and you're gonna hear me say this probably for a couple of other books, normally I do not enjoy stories that have hookups at their center. It's not that I am prudish about sex or don't enjoy reading about it. I just personally don't find that romances in books tend to be well suited to that being like the foundation of the relationship. You know what I mean? If you're fucking so much, I'm not going to get a lot of on-page conversations, and I think conversations are at the heart of a successful relationship. I was unsure of what to think about this one going into it because I'd heard that this one is very sex heavy, but I think it works really well for our heroine, and I think it helps to explain she is the way she is. I think it takes a really masterful author to be able to write relationship dynamics into sex scenes in a way like this. I found out so much about their relationship and how these two would work long term just from the way that they have sex, which feels weird to say, but it somehow worked, and I really did appreciate this book. Got done with this and I was like, I can see why other people will not enjoy this, again because of the rampant hookups, because of the lack of frothiness that I feel like is typical in an Ali Hazelwood book, but I think because I don't care about the frothiness of books, I really liked this and it really landed for me, and I am now a shill for Ali Hazelwood. I have to say it. I think that there's not been a single book that I have given less than 4 stars for her, maybe some of her novellas, but everything else has been 4 stars plus. This is no exception. I gave it 5 stars. Contrast to the last 2 books. This next one is one that is from a new to me author, and unfortunately it did not work for me, which is a bummer. I really don't want to be an old hag stuck in my ways, unwilling to try new things, but A Fragile Enchantment just didn't work for me. The synopsis seemed really promising. It is a book set in a magical version or rendering of Regency England. We have a heroine, Neve, who is dying of whatever magic she has, and she doesn't know when she's going to die, but in the meantime she wants to save her family and improve their material condition. So she is going to go to a rival kingdom or a neighboring kingdom and dress the royal family, or like the bride and groom, for the royal wedding. And while she's there, she ends up, I think, falling for the groom. I wouldn't know because I DNF'd this book at 25%. The thing about this book, and the thing that just didn't really work for me and had me questioning why I was reading it, honestly, was the characters. I loved this setting. I thought the setting was really nice, but Neve as a character was so bland, so boring, and I couldn't really understand her character motivations. And then our hero, I feel feel like his character changed a lot throughout the course of the story, at least the 25% that I read. Sometimes he's a total asshole, sometimes he was really nice, and then on top of that, there are two guys, I think they're brothers, one's a king or like going to become the king, I don't know. There's two brothers, right? Two royal brothers. I couldn't tell for a long time which she was going to end up with, and I don't think that was intentional. Like, I don't think it was a narrative choice. I think it was more just like, it's unclear because you're not characterizing your hero very well kind of situation. Anyway, I DNF'd this book. I think I've already said that. DNF'd it 25%, and I have no desire to pick it up again. Moving on to a mystery thriller, because I decided that I needed to put a mystery thriller on this list for some reason. I mean, to be fair, it sounded interesting. The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins is one that has that like mysterious family secrets, dead mommy thing that did appeal to me. It's pretty solid. I think I would have rated it more highly if I hadn't had just watched Saltburn before this, because there is kind of a similar vibe and tone to this book. But basically, Ruby is an old broad who has been married to a bunch of different men who all wind up dead. But she, of course, has nothing to do with any of these mysterious deaths. Anyway, Ruby adopts a son a while back, and she really lavished money and material possessions and education on him, which he felt really lucky for. But whenever he left home at 18 to like go to college, he never came back. He didn't really want anything to do with this family, and we don't really know why until Ruby, of course, dies and leaves a lot of money behind. He still wants nothing to do with this until he is called back home by some of his relatives, adopted relatives, and he has to go and like face them and or deal with like the family secrets that are unfolding. We find out more, of course, about Ruby and her character, and we find out more about Camden, the son, his relationship with the other people that are like around this table as they're like talking about things. This is not a super memorable mystery thriller. I think that's because the way that things unfolded, like there weren't a ton of surprises. Like there were a couple of twists and turns I didn't see coming, but for the most part, you knew how the story was going to end and like what the answers were going to be. But it was like fun enough. I give it 3 stars, and I think that if you, I don't know, have an audiobook credit lying around or you want to get this from your library, I think it's worth checking out. One book that I have a physical copy of that I didn't finish or didn't read at all, The Atlas Complex by Olivia Blake. I put this on the list because I was like, you know what? I need to finish the series that I start because I'm bad at that. And guess what? I'm still bad at it. I just like do not finish series that I start. I think a big part of that is because I'm on the YouTube frequently. I read for YouTube purposes, and I don't know, I just feel like it's less interesting to watch a vlog of someone reading like the second or third book in a series. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't unless it was like a whole series vlog. And that being said, I will be doing a whole series vlog over on Patreon at some point for these 3 if you want to see my thoughts and feelings. I really liked Atlas 6, for the record. I have read that first book, but I just didn't continue, okay? A book that I think I still have a copy of. Where that copy is, I don't know. I think it is on my cell pile. Fangirl Down. Tessa Bailey has been much less of a consistent author for me in recent years. I used to put all of her books on like my most anticipated list, and I think this might be the last year that I do so because I just have not had a lot of luck with her stories lately. And it's honestly not that the quality of her stories varies that much, but obviously my enjoyment of her books does. So, I hate to say it, but Fangirl Down was a swing and a miss for me. It's about a fangirl who helps revive the career of a golfer who is kind of angry and also not very good at his sport. He's kind of ragey. He kind of sucks really bad. She is just relentlessly cheery and happy, and she is going to help this man. I'm not sure why I thought this book with such a kooky plotline would work for me, but it didn't, because I really cannot stand when we have a heroine or even a hero who's obsessed with their, partner before they even know them. She's obsessed with this man's golf career. She is like his biggest fangirl, and she ends up like, working for him and kind of like helping his career. And I just really don't like books with crazy power imbalances like this. I think it honestly might be more questionable for me than certain age gap romances. I just feel like the power dynamic is that kind of weird. Josephine, again, like her sunshiny attitude coupled with Wells's bad one, it just left me wanting to give her a hug and wanting to punch him. I really loved It Happened One Summer, which I think a lot of y'all probably already know, because that book had a lot of heart to it. It had not only these like funny moments, these crazy plot lines, these kind of wildly smutty sex scenes, they also had moments where the heroine and the hero were growing a lot, growing in romance together, like having good conversations and being compatible for each other and having a genuine connection. Here, I just wanted it all to stop. I didn't enjoy it. Okay, 2 stars. So I was reading Wildfire while putting this list together, and I realized how much I liked it in comparison to Icebreaker, so I figured that Daydream might stand a chance at also being a good book, and I was right. Daydream is about our overachiever eldest daughter, Hallie, her neurodivergent hockey captain hero, Henry. Lots of H's in this book, Hallie and Henry. It has that like classic sports romance trope, but it is not done in the same way that it is in a lot of books. I feel like normally when you've got heroine helping a hero pass a class, which is kind of what happens in this book, you have a hero who doesn't want to be tutored, who thinks he's too good to be tutored. And in this book, he doesn't feel that way at all. And Hallie is not really truly tutoring him, just like helping him with his studies. They're not in the same class. They like are kind of mutual friends, and I don't know, y'all, they just fall in love. This book is really about the emotional challenges as these two are going through college and dealing with their separate families and or separate priorities in life. And it was just genuinely really solid, sweet, new adult college sports romance. There are probably a few too many side characters, which is kind of the case for all of Hannah Grace's books so far, but I can excuse that because, you know, they felt accurate to college at least. I mean, a lot of us have a lot of friends in college. I don't know. I prefer reading books where the heroes are unrealistically kind and incredible because I think that's what we should expect in real life. And I give this book 5 stars. The next book might end up on my most disappointing of the year list because it started off really promising, but within a few chapters, I wanted to smash this book over the hero's head. For some reason, this hardcover is really heavy, and I feel like that probably would have inflicted some damage, which he deserved, okay, because he mega fucking sucked. This book's about our main character, Emma, who is a screenwriter, but she hasn't had much success in the way of like career growth because she is the primary caretaker for her father, who suffered an injury semi-recently. Her life kind of gets flipped upside down when she's given this opportunity to revise the screenplay of her favorite screenwriter. She jumps on the opportunity, of course, because she wants to meet this guy and she wants to pick his brain, and she also wants to help him out because he needs to get this rom-com done so that he can get a different screenplay published. She doesn't want to write a rom-com, but he is forced to, and I liked the promise of that. I thought it was fun. I mean, that's why I put this book on the list, but he fucking sucks. I thought, oh, it's gonna be collaborative. Our hero's gonna learn about love because he obviously can't write a good rom-com because he doesn't know love, and our heroine's gonna show it to him, and it just didn't happen. Our heroine's manager kind of conned her into coming. She doesn't want to come necessarily. I mean, she does because she wants to meet this guy, but she doesn't want to come because she doesn't want to leave her dad behind under the care of her little sister who's like not the most responsible, but she decides she's going to do it. But her manager again conned her into doing this and didn't tell Charlie, the hero of this book, that our heroine was coming. So he is not exactly receptive to the fact that our heroine's there, and he makes it very well known. He insults her looks, he insults her intelligence, and he just acts like he is God's gift. He's just an abominable dick to her, and don't think that that's okay. And I feel like the redemption arc that tried to take place here, the miscommunication and the reveal at the end of the book as to why he was the way he was, did not make up for the secondhand embarrassment I felt from reading our heroine getting just obliterated by this man, torn down multiple times. It wasn't just once. It would have been bad enough if she overheard him talking about her just one time at the beginning of the book, but it kept happening. It kept happening that he would belittle her and put her down and act like she wasn't important to him, and I cannot fucking stand that. I really didn't like this book. Debating on what to rate this, but it's between a 1 and a 2 star. It really pissed me off that much. Just for the Summer is a book that I added to my list because I knew Abby Jimenez would deliver a hauntingly romantic story, and she really did that. She did that. The setup for this book, I will say, is kind of corny. It has a hero who posts on Reddit about the fact that every time he gets dumped, his ex finds their soulmate immediately after. And of course, our heroine starts messaging him, and they talk about how, oh my god, we both love cats, how crazy is that, you know? The setup is pretty superficial, and it is pretty corny, but looking beyond that, there is so much heart to the story. The heroine is one that I think has some of the best representation of trauma that I think I've ever read in a book. She has a really tough relationship with her mom that is kind of at the forefront of the story, and Justin has big emotions to deal with of his own because his mom is going to prison and he is now responsible for taking care of his 3 younger siblings. So both hero and heroine are dealing with some kind of challenging things on their own, and they decide that they're going to let this relationship just be something that is fleeting and fun and sexy. But then real life kicks in and they realize that they actually might want to do this for real. But of course, real life is challenging and complicated, and they've got a lot of things to work through. So this story I thought was really, really remarkable. Again, once you get past some of that superficial stuff. I know a lot of people are, I don't want to say unwilling to look past it, but a lot of people can't. I have seen that in the negative reviews for this book. But I think if you are willing to push through the beginning of this book that feels a little bit silly, you'll realize how deeply romantic this book is and how both characters are so well suited for each other and grow so much together. I loved and adored this book. I think my Goodreads review says, is this all-time favorite book of the year material? And I think it might be because I don't think I've read anything that has topped this year. It is so good. 5 stars. Okay, so The Breakup Tour is, I believe, one of the first books that I read from this list, and I gave it 3 stars. And I think both of those things combined can explain why I remember so little about this book and what did or did not work about it for me, but I tried to jog my memory and I'm gonna try my best to endeavor to explain. It's a Taylor Swift inspired book. Our heroine has a breakup song concept album, and her most recent ex thinks it's about him. It is not, however. It is about her college boyfriend who she ends up breaking up with, or he breaks up with her. There's a misunderstanding, miscommunication that goes on, Anyway, she reconnects with him, he goes on tour with her, and they fall in love. The thing is, the vibe of this book was not very fun, and I think that that's because it was this author duo who wrote it. Ugh, I hate to say that, but their books tend to have a kind of a melancholy vibe to them. So it's odd to me that they would pick this topic and then not even attempt to bring any levity to it. I guess fine with the idea of like the melodrama behind it if it had been executed better, but there were just so many plot points also that I didn't care about. Look, old people I think deserve love as well, but the divorced mom hooking up with the bus driver, I don't know, I just like didn't care. I didn't care. 3 stars. Leave it to Christina Lauren to surprise me with a heartfelt romance. I put The Paradise Problem on this list because the cover, the vibe, everything about it really seemed like it would be the same level of silliness as on Honeymooners, but it wasn't. The heroine in this book married our hero back in college so she could get access to better living accommodations, but they never actually dated and they never actually lived together. But they also did never get divorced, which is convenient for our hero because he needs to prove that he has been married for a certain amount of time to get access to his inheritance. He is the heir to a chain of grocery stores that's like pretty popular in the United States, but of course it's not going to be easy for him to convince his family that this romance is for real, and he has to take his bride to his little sister's wedding on a private island. So again, kind of close contact with this family who was kind of evil, to be honest. I liked this. It was a little bit Succession-y at parts, a little bit on Honeymooners-y, of course, but mostly just a really solidly written romance. Christina Lauren never blew me away with super unique characters that I'm going to be thinking about for years to come. I honestly couldn't tell you either of the characters' names without looking at the flap of this dust jacket, but these two were unique enough that I felt satisfied. I appreciated how these two fell in love. You know, you need unique enough characters for me to be like, oh wow, I can see how these two are going to make it work long term. And that happened here. 4 stars. All right, we have another situation on our hands. The kind where a book was really good, but also kind of forgettable. And I hate saying that, but here we go. Swift and Saddled is about Ada and Weston. She's an interior designer who is, you know, trying to like make a name for herself. Weston is the son of the ranch, son of the guy who owns the ranch that Ada is going to be doing work on. Anyway, she hooks up with a dude at a bar the day before she goes to the ranch to kind of see what's up, not realizing the guy that she ends up hooking up with at the bar is Weston, and now they're gonna like have this chemistry and they're gonna try to fight their feelings for each other, but of course it's not gonna work and they're gonna enter into a relationship. Here's the thing. This book, amongst the other ones that I'm talking about, kind of falls into the Elsie Silver, Cara DeWitt side of things, but I think the problem here is that like it's not riotously funny. It's not deeply romantic. It's just a little funny. It's just a little romantic, and that's not a bad thing. Sometimes you just want to pick up a book and like have a good time with it, but when it comes to the memorability of a book like that, I don't think this one is that for me. I mean, I genuinely, like reading back what I wrote down for my notes, I'm like, I don't remember the moments of this book. I don't remember sexy moments. I don't remember anything about this book except for the plot of the book, like the general synopsis that I could read off of the back of the book. And that's a problem for me. While I enjoyed this, I'm gonna give it 4 stars rather than 5 because it doesn't have lasting power. Right, there was a book that I put on this list that didn't come out and I haven't heard anything about it and I'm really bummed, and it would be the first book in the Skybriar series by Talia Hibbert. I don't know if the series is ever going to come out, but it does seem like she has something new coming out soon and I'm excited about that. I'll honestly read whatever this woman puts out, so I don't care, but I am a little bummed that like I didn't have a new release to read from her this year. Business Casual by the ever lovely, always lovely Miss Burger King Borson is the last book in the Lovelight Farm series, and I added it to the list because of course I love the Lovelight Farm series and I do really appreciate the Gilmore Girls vibes of this world. Okay, so this one is about Nova and Charlie. Nova is a woman who is trying to open up her own tattoo shop in the small town she lives in, and she's putting a lot of pressure on herself to get it right. So she's kind of in serious mode, you know, taking herself maybe a little too seriously. Then we have our hero Charlie, who is the opposite of that. He is a really fun-loving guy who has a less than fun-loving job. Is a suit, he works in the city, and he occasionally comes back to the small town to see his little half-sister, older half-sister, I believe. Anyway, they are an interesting match, right? Kind of an opposites attract sort of situation. They start banging, it turns into more. Now, normally I'm not into one-night stands kind of romances. I've said that before, and I can't say that this book necessarily changed my mind about that, but it didn't bother me too terribly much because of the other sweet elements of the story. The end of this book, the semi-grovel moment, is one that is like imprinted and burned into my brain, and it's something I look back on with like a lot of fondness. My only real complaint is that the hookup component, of course, took away from the conversational moments. I think there could have been a couple of more conversational moments here to really prove to me why Nova and Charlie were so well suited. Otherwise, this book was really fun and I give it 4 stars. A book that was decidedly not fun, but in a nice way, was Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. It's a sapphic romance that I added to my list after really, really enjoying this author's Christmas book last year, Kiss Her Once for Me. A great holiday romance if you're in the market for one. Also, I'll leave a link in the description down below to my Christmas romance recommendations video if you're looking for one. Anyway, this one is about 2 two ladies, Logan and Rosemary, who used to be friends back in grade school, but had a bit of a falling out, sort of like misunderstanding moment, and now they really, really hate each other, which is tough because they're both high school teachers at the same high school that they attended, and they decide they want to be high school teachers because of an English teacher that had a really big impact on the both of them, a gay man who is just the fucking best. And this teacher, unfortunately, is dying of cancer at the start of the story, and he asks our two heroines to escort him across the country as he kind of does his like death road trip, his, you know, last hurrah before he can go and die in a home in Maine that he's had for a while, that he wants to get to. This book was not a fun one because it is really heavy, of course, with the emphasis on grief and dying, but because of that, I think this is really unique compared to a lot of other romances and just books that I've read this year. I think it handled the topic of grief so well, and as I was dealing with my own grief this year, this book got a good cry out of me. I think that it really landed, and I don't know, I connected deeply with the emotions that were on display here. I think the only complaint that I have is the romantic portion of this book. I really wanted to root for Logan and Rosemary, but they were kind of immature in some ways, and also I feel like there just wasn't enough time for the romance in the story. I don't necessarily begrudge the author for that. I think the emphasis here really was more on like friendship and the impact of this teacher on their lives, and how you can, I guess, like grow in grief together, and how grief can bring people together actually, as well as push them apart, but bring them together in this book. But again, I feel like there could have been a couple maybe more romantic moments. Regardless, this is a 5-star book, not for the romance, but just for what this book is. At First Bite was a book that I had on my radar for two different reasons. Number one, the plot of this book sounded so juicy, and the hero and heroine in this book are both over the age of 30, which I thought was really fun because I feel like we tend to just read books or romances in particular with heroes and heroines who are in their early 20s or mid 20s. This book fucking delivered, okay? This is one of the books that I've read most recently from this list. I think I read it again a couple of weeks ago. It's so fucking good. This one is about our main character, our heroine Athena. She's a teacher at the start of the story. She is engaged to a really great guy, a pediatrician named Johnny, and she hasn't known him for very long, but they're going to get married, kind of a whirlwind romance, and he is going to support all of her dreams. She doesn't really dream of being a teacher. She doesn't really dream of anything, I would say. She does dream of like finding a dream job eventually, but she hasn't had much success in the past, right? She's been a teacher for 3 years, which is the longest she's ever held down a job, and this kind of draws the ire of Johnny's older brother, Matthew. Matthew's also a pediatrician. He also helped to raise Johnny. He's like 9 years older than Johnny. He does not think that Johnny and Athena should get married. He does not think that Athena is serious enough. He thinks that she's just taking advantage of Johnny for his money. That's not like entirely untrue, though she doesn't have like super ulterior motives. I mean, it's just like part of what appeals to her about a life with Johnny. It's like, oh, okay, like I'll have the freedom to figure out my passions and my dreams. Anyway, Matthew doesn't really like this, and after a while, he helps to call off this wedding. So there's going to be no wedding between Johnny and Athena. But this is kind of tricky as well because during the engagement party before they're broken up, Matthew and Athena meet under different circumstances. Like they don't know who the other person is, and they have this like connection immediately. And Athena remarks honestly that this guy actually might even be better suited for her than Johnny. He's like sort of her in age, and he just seems to like get her on like a mind level, until of course she figures out who he is, vice versa, and they're like, ugh, I'm gonna view this, you know, meeting in a different light now. Anyway, Athena can't get away from either of these men because she ends up buying a house between their two houses. Gonna gift it to Johnny upon their marriage, and he's going to be able to like expand his home into that like empty lot once it's raised. Of course they don't get married, and she is stuck with this home that she's purchased, and she's kind of in debt, and she doesn't have her teaching job because she moved to a different city to be with this man, and she's not happy. This book's tricky in that I don't know that everybody's going to like it. I think all of my favorite books tend to be that way. But the reason for that, and the reason I don't think this is for everybody, is that Athena, our heroine, is tricky. Of course, I think I kind of mentioned it. She doesn't really have a easy time holding down jobs. She has multiple degrees. She has parents who are both doctors and are willing to kind of fund Athena's lifestyle, even though she's in her mid-30s. And she also has a deeply depressive episode in this book that is kind of hard to read if you've been through a depressive episode of your own. But while some of that could be read in a bad light, or you could view her in a bad light because of this, I find it kind of makes her more real as a character. And then our hero, oh my god, he might be the saving grace of this book. Matthew, you think you're gonna hate him because again, he like warns our other, I was gonna say other hero, he warns Johnny off of Athena. You think, okay, he's like not a nice guy, he's like judging Athena, but like doesn't she deserve to be judged a bit? Just kidding. He turns around in spectacular fashion and just proves to be a truly remarkable hero, someone who is so sexy, so deeply romantic, is a perfect caregiver. When our heroine is going through a horrible depressive episode, he washes her fucking hair. Like, he is so delightful. Deeply misunderstood. Both of them, I think, are just misunderstood characters who felt so real, and you might not always like them because they're real people, but I loved it. I loved this book. I think that Olivia Dade writes some of the most real romance out there. Read a few other books by her, and they have all really impressed me, but this is definitely by far my favorite, and I'm so glad I read this. I'm so glad I have like the special edition from Afterlight, because it was such a banger, and 5 stars. Spectacular. Delicious. I hate to like go out with a fizzle rather than a bang. I feel like I should have saved that one for last, but I'm just going in the order in which I put these books on the list from the last video. The video I made when I thought that these were gonna be, you know, 5 stars. Fading to Blood, last and also least, okay? The early reviews for this really suckered me in and convinced me this was going to be like the romantasy of the year, and it just wasn't, okay? Basically, our heroine Freya has cool powers, and Freya is married to a shitty man, and this shitty man ends up giving her up, or like allowing her to marry someone else because this guy has more powers than the guy she's married to. So she's gonna marry a Jarl who wants to use her powers, only Freya's husband's son is really fucking hot and Freya really wants to bang him, and guess what they do? That's kind of not good, you know, because this guy is power hungry. Not the son, but the husband. The husband is power hungry. He doesn't really like, or doesn't like the idea of our heroine banging his son, so that kind of puts her in a pickle, and I'm supposed to care, but I didn't. So I gave this book 2 stars. And that's it. Those are all of my 5-star predictions for 2024. And if I could count, I would count them all up and how many actually proved to be successful. But when I look at this year as a whole, when I look at the books that I've read and the books that I put on this list, I think this is my most successful list thus far. I think I was really honest with myself when I made this list about the books that I would enjoy. And as a result, most of these books I think are 5 and 4-star reads. I mean, obviously there's some duds in here too, because that's bound to happen. But for the most part, I've had a really good reading year with romances. And I'm super excited, I think, to reflect on not just these anticipated books, but also just like my reading as a whole. I wonder how many 5 stars I'm gonna have in comparison to other years. I feel like it's been a pretty good reading year. I think it's been like a 5-star year or a more 5-star year, but we'll reflect on that when we get to it. I don't know what video that's going to be, but it'll be a video. Maybe my best books of the year video, I'll let you know. But thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you found something new to add to your TBR. I love y'all so much, and I'll see you in the next one.